Okay, so hey guys, welcome to the first episode of the Sound Good podcasts buried in Bandcamp. These are going to be Micah only episodes. I'm Micah, but I'm sure you could tell that by the fact that the intro music was much lower quality and that this is not Michael's voice. During this little intermission from the main series, I thought it would be cool to shine a spotlight on some of the many Bandcamp only albums that we can't dedicate an entire 1 or 2 album episode to. And there's a ton. For this first episode, I decided I'm going to cheat and split it up into 2 albums I'm very familiar with and 2 that are much newer. That way I can get a feel for how to structure these talks. The albums I'm going to talk about are Pacific Myth from Protest to Hero, Myra by Spurv, the Viscera EP from Haunted Shores, and Virus.dos by Master Boot Record. Pacific Myth and Viscera are the slightly older albums I've had a lot of time with, while Myra and Virus.dos are the more newer or more recent releases. And so with that, let's get into Pacific Myth by Protest to Hero. Pacific Myth by Protest the Hero was released on November 18th, 2016, and is the 5th major release from the progressive metal Canadian outfit, and was released following the end of a unique subscription model on Bandcamp. After the record-breaking run of their Indiegogo campaign for the release of their 4th album, Volition, Protest chose to write, record, and master a brand new song monthly for 6 months, offering high-resolution artwork, lyrics, notes, and high-quality digital downloads for each track to those who paid a monthly subscription fee from October 2015 to March 2016. I was one of those subscribers, and the artwork for that collection of songs is still by far my favorite set of computer backgrounds. Following the end of the 6 months period, I created a playlist of all the songs in the order that they were released, this being Ragged Tooth, Tidal, Cold Water, Cataract, Harbinger, and Caravan, respectively. The proper release of the Pacific Myth CD, however, had Tidal as the opening track and Ragged Tooth was second, flipping the order. This was jarring at first, but after several listens, it became apparent that Tidal is not only a better opening track musically, because of the way that it fades in, but it fits lyrically as well. If you pay attention to the lyrics, you'll notice that Cold Water ends with the lyrics that Cataract starts with, and the same can be said between Tidal and Ragged Tooth. If Ragged Tooth were the first opening track, you would have the reverse of this pattern, and you would lose a level of continuity in the album. Continuing with interesting facts about the production of the album, as an additional perk to those paying the subscription fee on Bandcamp, Protest made a thread one of the months asking their subscribers what they wanted to hear the band incorporate into the next month's song. I want to say that I asked for another Jada Kelly guest appearance, but the overwhelming consensus seemed to be piano. This made a lot more sense in hindsight, as we haven't heard much piano from Protest since their album Fortress, which was 3 albums ago. What this became was a fantastically somber piano intro to the 5th song on the album, Harbinger, before the song kicked into full gear with amazing low guttural vocals from Rhodey Walker and a punchy double bass focused rhythm from new drummer Mike Lorati. We get the fan-suggested piano yet again towards the end of the track, with one of the proggiest moments I can think of from the band, in which a guitar and piano duet goes between a unison melody and a call-and-response melody format. A similar example of this, for reference, is the instrumental section of Lost Not Forgotten from A Dramatic Turn of Events by Dream Theater, if we have any Dream Theater listeners. The last song that I want to draw attention to is the final song, Caravan. Not only is this Protest the Hero's longest song to date, but it is their best crafted closing track, in my opinion. Not only does the song wrap up Pacific Myth with a neat bow, but it also, in a sense, wraps up all of Protest's previous work up until this point, effectively signaling the end of this era, and I'm hoping paving the way for the next. Throughout the song, the band sneaks in a bar from one song from each of their 4 previous full albums, these being Bury the Hatchet from Kazaya, The Dissentients from Fortress, C'est la Vie from Scurrilous, and Drumhead Trial from Volition. On top of this, Roadie's lyrics start off continuing the ocean theme of the previous tracks on the album, but eventually they develop into a self-aware critique of Pacific myth, the band itself, and entertainment itself. Lines such as the sun, the moon, the earth, the shore, tired metaphors played out before your eyes, call back to the bodies depicted in the first song of the album Tidal, making the listener question the actual meaning of the seemingly deep lyrics heard previously. A catchy way of saying nothing, but a narrative seems to allude to something more, with a purpose and a real direction, but they're just words punched in a template, the same mistakes we made before. I love this song and these lyrics because it's so meta for a lyricist to make you retroactively question the quality and meaning of all the songs you heard previously, when up to this point a consistent concept had been executed. The main takeaway is that it seems that Roadie appears to want to leave the listener with a better awareness of how original entertainment that they consume is. And I guess I should talk about the music of the album at some point, instead of just the lyrics and little tidbits, but whatever. Pacific Myth is the first release to feature the former The Kindred member, Mike Lorati, as drummer. Kindred are also a rather out-there prog rock band, and so his filling of the position is well-earned. I love the drumming on this record because it's not only a return to the expected style of Protest the Hero. After Lamb of Gods, Chris Adler left his unique, and I should say phenomenal, mark on Volition, but it is also a refinement of the style of the previous drummer, Mo Carlson. Mike's drumming lends a lot more to the band's progressive rock tendencies on songs such as Cold Water, and still offering complex rhythms to complement the hectic melodies of songs such as Cataract, rather than falling back on cookie-cutter metal drum patterns. The guitar work is notably less shreddy than previous albums on the surface, but make no mistake, the guitars are in just as much constant motion as they've ever been. The interplay between guitarists Luke Hoskin and Tim Miller is as good, if not better, than it's ever been as well. They're finally not afraid to let more chorus lines breathe, while still tastefully incorporating face-melting leads as the basis for a verse rather than a solo section. This choice serves to create perhaps the most accessible Protest the Hero record yet, as it feels much less busy and dense on the surface, but if you take the time to pay attention, it has just as many layers as any other album. The bass work is at its strongest when Cam McClellan and Mike Lorati have moments to themselves in songs such as Cold Water, which contains a fantastic bass solo that gets its own time to shine before playing again alongside a repetition of a main verse from Roadie. Overall, this is absolutely the album that I would use to introduce people to Protest the Hero, mainly because of how refined their songwriting and production are at this point, but also because this appears to offer a good idea of the direction that the band's future work is aimed to go. And with that talk done, I'm going to move on to Myra by Norwegian-based Spurv. Myra is the third release from Norwegian post-rock band Spurv and came out on May 31st, 2018. As far as I can tell, this was an independent release based on their Bandcamp info, but I could be totally wrong. In the spirit of probably being wrong, I don't know that I would solely label this as a post-rock album either. You'll probably be surprised to hear that I find it more descriptive to call the album progressive post-rock. My argument for this claim is that there appears to be a concept conveyed throughout the runtime of this album. Melodies are very drawn out with interspersed technical moments, and the most telling characteristic of them all, 3 of the 8 tracks on the album are longer than 8 minutes. The mood of the album is immediately apparent via the artwork, which depicts a blue-gray, misty/foggy forest with a very sad-looking girl, presumably Myra, clinging to a stag. This vibe carries over into the song titles that are only in Norwegian, so excuse me if Google translated them terribly. I never stop being wrong, basically. But the titles translated to "A lift in case" and "New forest is brought forward. From the depths under the stone rests the pelvis song. A pale light sounds from the myrtle temple. The voice of the old man breaks. Everything ends, even at night." Even the track ordering float is a very somber poem. These song titles invoke somber imagery of wilderness with spiritual undertones, but with that Scandinavian kind of spiritual that has a very specific feel. Now, my gut reaction is to say that this isn't a very technical piece of music, which is not a fair assessment. The complexity of this record is subtler than I am typically used to, as the technicality comes from the construction of intricately layered ambient soundscapes. The standout for me, however, is the drummer, who does get explicitly technical in certain sections, typically a climax or bridge. These are groovy, rhythm-focused sections, but there aren't any straight jamming solo sections on this record. Every melody is clearly methodical. In terms of ambience, the main contributors are the down-tuned, overdriven guitars, deep, droning, oppressive synth, and beautifully arranged horns and strings. The tone of the artwork, in unison with this instrumentation and the highs and lows of the songwriting, lead to near tear-jerking moments on songs such as "The Voice of the Old Man Breaks." And despite the 46-minute runtime, I never checked to see what track I was on until the second-to-last song, because until that point, I was fully engrossed in the wilderness that the music depicts. The songs are structured to flow together seamlessly, making the album more of a single piece of music. Think Colors by Between the Buried and Me. Reset the clock. If you're ready for a moody post-hardcore style prog experience, go check out Myra by Spurv. The Viscera EP was released on November 3rd, 2015, as the debut release from the heavy metal side project of Mark Holcomb and Misha Mansour of Periphery, or should I say Count Miracula and Beelzebub. That's what their Bandcamp info says for this album. But yeah, this is one of the many side projects of the dudes from Washington, D.C. prog metal band Periphery, which include Of Man, Not of Machine, comprised of Misha Mansour and Good Tiger's Elliot Coleman, Jake Bowen's electronic album called Isometric, as well as Jake and Misha's new side project 4 Seconds Ago, which is electronic, and they just put out a new album called The Vacancy on the band's new record label, which is independent, called 3 Recordings. Periphery's lead vocalist Spencer Sotelo has a solo project titled Endure, which, from what I can tell, the best way to think about it is kind of Trent Reznor-esque. And one of the cool things I noticed while looking into the Haunted Shores Bandcamp is that there are a couple of Periphery songs that got their start as songs under this project, specifically Passenger, which was a bonus track to P1, and Scarlet, which is one of the singles from P2. They're not demo quality, but they are just a hair under the polish that we ended up getting on Periphery 1 and 2. Either way, it's really cool to see where these songs came from. But what is the Viscera EP? First, we'll start with the album cover. Stephen Mercado created a fantastic representation of the themes and moods expressed by the music on this album. The art features an almost damp turquoise background with a hummingbird within a bubble being popped by something. The gradient around the edges of the art gives it a very spacious, three-dimensional feel. These aspects are important as the Viscera EP is essentially Mark and Misha's unique take on the sound and structure of black metal. This is also apparent in the joke titles seen on the record, which is par for the course for any Periphery fan. Songs such as Norway Jose and Harrison Fjord make it clear that the two drew from a Norwegian metal influence and are poking fun at that fact. The main emphasis for the drums on this record are the intense blast beats and overall face-melting craziness. But instead of what one would normally think of for black metal, the guitars are absurdly intricate and involved with upfront soaring leads, and this approach to songwriting and mixing is essentially the stamp of Mark and Misha. Most of the riffs are mid to high range with dips into the low register for standout filthy metal moments. The best way I could break down Periphery's guitar style into words is a combination of intricate yet minimal arpeggiation into fast riffs backed by rhythmically complicated chugging. The difference between this and Periphery's work being the substitution of chugging riffs for atmospheric effect heavy backing guitars. I will say, it turns out the drums on this album are programmed, but until I considered the album for this discussion, I had no idea. Even knowing this fact, I personally felt no loss in enjoyment or wonder towards the masterful orchestration of the drum parts. These are by far the punchiest black metal drums I've ever heard, and I really hope there's drum covers out there that do this mix justice. The aggressive moments of the EP are amplified by the decision to add melodic breaks into songs, as well as dedicate entire tracks to ambience, such as Memento or Vectors. Vectors does progress out of ambient territory, but only to about a ballad level of energy. Blast Inc. is the most interesting song, but also my least favorite as a listener. I like the idea of saxophone interjected into metal, but this didn't do it for me at all. I understand that there's a certain vibe they were going for with the really dissonant melody that the saxophone was playing, but it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I understand that it's there for some people, but it just didn't really work for me personally. Maybe it'll work for you. Even 3 years later, this remains my favorite instrumental black metal release to this day. I highly recommend you check out the Viscera EP by Haunted Shores if you're in the mood for a crisply produced black metal experience. And finally, Virus.dos, released October 2nd, 2018, is the 8th full release from Italy-based electronic heavy metal musician Victor Love under the name Master Boot Record. This artist releases fully synthesized music with an emphasis on busy synthesizer lines backed by equally as busy sampled metal drums. For me, it feels like the only thing that stands out about the drums are the well-written cymbals and kick drum rhythms that generate a fantastic noisescape, and believe me, this is a really noisy album, and that's about all I can really say. I do feel like a better sample could have been used to give the drums more of an impact for each hit, especially come off critically thinking about the production of the Viscera EP from Haunted Shores. What stands out about the songwriting on this album is the intricate layering of the synthesizers. Fantastic leads sit atop bassy synth lines that give an impressive depth to the genre's seemingly shallow premise. Many pitches are covered, essentially accomplishing what a full band might with a traditional set of instruments. The synth lines at the foundation of most songs make me think they are inspired by the organ-like synth at the start of songs like Orion by Metallica. This notion is heavily supported by the fact that the song Mars almost outright copies the drum line from the start of the Metallica instrumental, even down to the transition drum fill out of the introduction. Past that intro, however, the song is wholly original. Constant time changes keep you on your toes as a listener, mainly resulting in your face being melted as the tempo more than doubles on songs such as Skynet. I'll talk about it later with Michael, but it cracked me up listening to Skynet for the first time because right before I started listening to this album, I finished the new Hawken record, Vectors, which contains a melody that is almost assuredly a reference to the Terminator 2 main theme. If you're into heavy metal and or synth, then this is a perfect album to use as background music for any task, and if you have the time, it can be a really enjoyable sit-down listening experience.